Welcome to the Halving Report. We're joined today by Mitchell Askew, the author of The Conservative Case for Bitcoin. Thanks for coming on the show. How's your day going so far?
I appreciate you having me on, man. It's kind of weird to see behind you my book next to Saifedean's books. It just feels a little I don't know. What's the word where you feel like you don't belong, like imposter syndrome or whatever. It's I'm excited to be here though and talk about Bitcoin.
Awesome, awesome. You know what I heard? If you don't feel like an imposter, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. So,
Yeah,
that's a good feeling that you have then.
absolutely.
Awesome, and congrats on releasing the book. That's an awesome achievement. You're 23 years old.
Yes, sir.
Nice, nice. What inspired you to write the book?
Yeah, I wanted to write a book so I grew up in the South, like I'm surrounded by rural conservative like evangelicals, and I wanted to write a book that appeals to their pre-existing worldview and orange pills them essentially, because that's like the background I come from, and this is kind of the book that would have orange pilled me when I first got into Bitcoin. Writing is something I've done for a while. I just never really published anything. I find it to be the best way to really solidify things I'm learning because I can read and listen to podcasts, but if I don't write things down, I don't really remember the ideas. And so I wanted to just write out my case for Bitcoin in a way. And I wanted to create a resource too that really shows how Bitcoin is aligned with American values because I see a lot of this uh debate that Bitcoin is, anti-American because it's trying to replace the dollar, but I really view Bitcoin as being more American than the US dollar if you really boil things down to the principles that the United States of America was founded on. The dollar has really strayed far away from those because it violates people's property rights, it's stealing from people. Inflation is taxation without representation. And Bitcoin gives people property rights in a way that's aligned with the Constitution, right? Your rights don't come from the government. They don't come from the Constitution, even. They come from God. And Bitcoin offers that in a way that no other asset can. So that's really the core thesis of my book. And that's the point I want to get to the world.
It's awesome. I look forward to getting into the book and seeing everything. How did you first get into Bitcoin? How did you first start, I guess, when did you take the orange pill and really get into research and stuff?
Yeah, it was late 2020 around Christmas time. So throughout the whole year of 2020, obviously there was crazy stuff going on in the world. Peak clown world at the time. The Fed printed a lot of money. The I wasn't super trustworthy of systems because there'd been a lot of censorship online and a lot of things were down that I was very suspect of, everything I'd learned throughout my life. And I had studied like I was studying economics in college, so I knew that hyperinflation had happened with other fiat currencies in mostly third worlds. But I saw how much money they printed with the dollar, and I got kind of frightened. I'm like, that could definitely happen here. Like, there's no reason to think if they continue to print dollars that our currency won't just lose all its value as well. So all that kind of led up to a Bitcoin bull market at the end of the year. And that's what caught my attention. But, all that stuff on the back of my mind, once I realized Bitcoin had a limited supply of 21 million and it can't be interfered with by the government, I was hooked. And so from late 2020 into to 2021, that bull market, I'm just studying Bitcoin nonstop, going down the rabbit hole, like confused by the altcoins for about 6 months, but then I've finally figured it out after a little while. So ever since then, it's been life changing, just staying down the rabbit hole and continue. I haven't found the bottom yet. I don't know anyone that really has.
Yeah, no, no, for sure. There's so much to learn, and you never stop learning with Bitcoin. But that was a really good time to, I guess, get into Bitcoin then, because you're right. We did have a huge bull rally then. Um, you know what? I think that's good. Like having the book is a good resource when trying to, I guess, help people learn about Bitcoin. I've noticed you can explain it to people as much as you want. But unless they kind of look into it for themselves, they're never really gonna click. So that's good that you have a
Resource that'll
resource to
guide
them.
people too. Right, right. I used to be, people would ask me about Bitcoin and I'm sitting here typing out paragraphs. And now I'm just like, all right, if you want to have a serious conversation, you got to read my book. And you hit on a good point there, which is people have to do the work themselves, right? You can explain Bitcoin, but when I think about my orange pill story, right? It wasn't anybody telling me these things and I'm listening like, oh, okay, that makes sense. It's like me doing the own work, me going out and drinking the water for myself. And you can't do the work for anybody else. So you can bring the horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So people, they just got to study Bitcoin on their own because nobody's gonna. We talk about orange pilling people, right? But ultimately, it's something you have to do yourself.
For sure. And I mean, we keep trying, but no, exactly. You gotta, there's no shortcuts. You really have to, I guess, get into it for yourself. But us as Bitcoiners, we can, I guess, try whatever we can to make people realize how messed up everything is and why Bitcoin
Right.
is something good for them.
Right. And I think there's a lot, I think it's definitely easier to give orange pill now, one, because there's so many more resources, right? Like everybody and their mom has written a Bitcoin book at this point, and I'm not the first, but I did, like, if you look at it, it's a short book, right? I wanted something that people can actually read within, just a couple of hours. And two, as kind of the clown world develops around us, it's easier to see how broken the fiat system is. If you come into Bitcoin in 2014, right, you find it then there's not, I mean, yeah, there were resources back then, but there's not just the abundance of Bitcoin educational tools out there. And two, Bitcoin had a lower market cap, right? There was more FUD that could be reasonable, right? Maybe the government could shut it down. Maybe, it was a bubble, right? Because at that point, you'd really only seen one bull market. You hadn't seen it come back from these massive bear markets necessarily. And two, or I guess the third point would be the fiat system. The problems weren't so readily apparent. Now, if you were super well versed in macro and stuff, you could probably see the writing on the wall. But today in 2024, we've got all these Bitcoin resources. We've seen it come back from all these bear markets. And three, we could see that the US debt to GDP is over 100%. Like, it's pretty clear that they're not going to be able to stop printing money. So at this point, if you're not orange pill, I think it's a lack of curiosity on an individual's part.
Yeah, we're kind of in uncharted territory right now. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. You mentioned that like you saw it happen to other countries, so there's no reason why you don't see it happening to the US dollar. That reminds me, back in 2019, I visited Lebanon, and $1 Canadian or US would get me around 1,500 Lebanese pounds, whereas today, $1, or that same dollar, will get me 100,000 Lebanese pounds. So the inflation or the value has like lost 100% or 1,000%. Like I forgot the math there, but the inflation has just gone up like 100-fold or
Right.
there's no reason why that can't happen in the US or in Canada or any of these other countries. And it just happened in Japan. They just
Yeah.
they just lost the value of their currency too. So
Yeah, over the weekend it lost like 5% of its value, which doesn't sound like much, but when you consider just the size of that market, right? Think about all the Japanese people who their purchasing power just went down 5%. If you've been saving your whole life, that's a lot of value that was just lost in the blink of an eye.
it's crazy because a lot of people know something is wrong, but not everybody has, or not everybody knows about Bitcoin yet, unfortunately. So that's why it's great that you have the book and you can, I guess, guide people in the right path to help them learn for themselves. And then that's the thing you mentioned. There's a lot of resources now. That's the thing with our space is, you know what? Everybody here, everybody I've met wants to help other people. So it's really a
Yeah.
good community of people.
Yeah, people will like dunk on the toxic maxis or whatever, and it can be intimidating if you first get on Twitter. You've got all these anons just like cursing each other out and telling people they're retarded. But really, if you talk to any Bitcoiner, they'd be happy to help you and like educate because we were all like newbies at one point. So there's like people will definitely help you in Bitcoin. I found it, and that's a really really great thing.
Right. And it's like tough love from the Bitcoin maxis because you know what? At the end of the day, like they'll rip on you for going into shit coins or meme coins or whatever. But again, it's tough love. Like,
Right.
I've also noticed with like stuff that have happened in like the past couple of years. The thing with Bitcoiners, I could disagree with Bitcoiners, but ultimately I respect them at the end of the day because they are for this movement of changing the world essentially. So that's the thing of, and it's not an echo chamber because again, you can post something on Twitter or X and then you'll get ripped apart by Bitcoin maxis, and that's a good thing.
Right. Absolutely. It seems like it at first when you get in. Like when I first got into Bitcoin in 2021, I was like, wow, everyone here is like really based and kind of like right wing and anti-government. And then I don't know, the more I interacted, I found that's not necessarily true. Those individuals tend to be the loudest in Bitcoin, but there really is quite a diverse array of worldviews. And it makes sense too, because Bitcoin is just money, right? It's neutral money. So like I wrote the conservative case for Bitcoin. That's just because that's sort of my philosophical background, right? But there's
Hmm.
a progressive case for Bitcoin book. Like you could probably write a communist case for Bitcoin, right? You could write all sorts of different frameworks because it's neutral money that appeals to anyone. Like I'm sure everybody in the entire world wants, money that can't be debased and money that they can send without it being censored, right? That's a concept that appeals to anybody unless you're wanting to be like dictator of the whole world, which I don't think that's many people. So, like 99% of the world, Bitcoin will make sense to them if they just did the time to understand it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Bitcoin, it's really for everybody. Your enemy can own Bitcoin. And again, it's a
Yeah.
money that allows you to be on the same playing field as them. You can't manipulate it, they can't manipulate it, and that's what we need.
Right. And that's another point I kind of touch on in my book. And I compare it to the First Amendment and free speech, right? So the idea behind the First Amendment is, hey, we might disagree, but we both have a right to talk. And with Bitcoin, it's kind of the same way. It's like, hey, we might disagree, but we both have a right to money to save our the fruits of our labor over time.
Right. We're about 208,500 blocks away from the next halving. Bitcoin just underwent its fourth halving around 11 days ago. Um, Hong Kong spot ETF just started trading last night, and then the Japanese yen is losing some of its value. How do you expect Bitcoin to move from here to react to this news and just everything that's going on?
Yeah. In the short term, I'm not very good at making price predictions. I don't necessarily think anybody is. I think likely what we do is probably kind of move sideways for a little while, maybe through the summer. And really, where I view Bitcoin over the next 3 to 4 years, it's going up. Like this, we know because fiat's going to get debased. But really, the question is, how much does fiat get debased, right? Can the Federal Reserve and global liquidity markets just kind of truck along, like go up a little bit? Then maybe Bitcoin, its next bull cycle will be somewhere in like 100 to 200,000. But if things really start to crack, like if we see more of these like banking crises like we saw in March of 2023, if we see the Japanese yen and other large currencies really start to debase, right, and those bond markets really start to tank, right, because we're just in this era of fiscal dominance, right? Like theoretically, the Fed is holding rates higher so you get inflation down, but you've got the Congress and the Treasury just running trillion-dollar deficits, which is putting liquidity into the markets. So you've got these counteractive forces. Like if they all start moving in the same direction, then we could really see Bitcoin just start to run and really absorb all of that dollar liquidity. So I think like lowball estimate for this cycle, we could see 150 to 200,000, but I mean we could see it all the way up into the millions. It's really anybody's guess. That's why I'm just holding Bitcoin and not using leverage and definitely holding my own keys.
Definitely. Did you also start a show recently?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I started so I work at Blockware Solutions. Well, we just rebranded to Blockware. Been writing a weekly newsletter for quite a while now, over a year and a half. I've at least been co-authoring it now since one of our other analysts left Blockware in September. I've done all of it except for the macro section, which I team up with our macro analyst Blake Davis. Yeah, but we're basically converting the newsletter into a video audio format. So kind of recapping all of the week's events in Bitcoin and macro, and we're doing that every Friday.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's such a new space. It's not new by any means, but it's such a like a niche space that still has so much potential to grow because there's so 99% of people still haven't found it, and 99% of people on this planet is now going to have to research or going to have to look into Bitcoin or look into this money because you can't avoid it. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I agree with you. It's gonna probably trade sideways for a little bit, but again, at the end of the day, the price doesn't matter. We're holding long term, we're hodling long term, and it's about using this new form of money instead of selling it because at the end of the day, Bitcoin goes up to whatever price. What do you sell it for? Fiat currency,
Right.
because that's the whole reason we got into it.
Right. Yeah, that's something. it drives me up the wall when someone asks, "Hey, when are you selling your Bitcoin?" We're never selling our Bitcoin, right? At the best, if you want to incentivize me to part with some of my Satoshis, you're going to have to offer me a real good or service, right? In the future, when Bitcoin appreciates in purchasing power, yeah, I might go buy a house. I might go buy a boat or a truck or some more weaponry or something, right? Or some meat. Like, I'm going to spend my Bitcoin and increase the quality of my life. But what I'm not going to do is put that Bitcoin and convert it into other assets, right? I'm only going to use it to consume. I'm not going to trade my Bitcoin and just hold dollars just for the sake of holding dollars, or hold commercial real estate, or hold stocks, or hold bonds, or hold gold, right? Anything that I want to save for the future for more than the next like week or month or years, I'm going to put that wealth in Bitcoin, right? So there's an important distinction to make, right? Because it's not, oh, we're never moving a single Satoshi, right? Because you want to increase the quality of your life, right? That's the point of having money that maintains purchasing power, because, hey, you don't want to consume today, but down the line, you want to consume and provide for your family and do all these things, right? But there's a big difference between doing that, trading your Bitcoin for a good or service, and then just trading your Bitcoin for dollars or holding dollars. That's never going to happen.
Yeah, for sure. There's often debate also around the scalability of Bitcoin. What are your thoughts around its current solutions, such as the Lightning Network, and what potential challenges do you foresee in the future?
Yeah, so this first point I'll make really can't be debated, right? Bitcoin, the base layer, cannot service 8 billion people. That's just a fact, right? I don't even know that it could service 1 billion people. But that's a feature, not a bug, right? We want something that is bedrock that we can build upon. And I think if we're right about Bitcoin as a store of value, right? If BTC, the asset that moves on the Bitcoin network, becomes a 10, 20, $100 trillion asset, there's going to be such a strong financial incentive for all the smartest minds in the world to build on Bitcoin. I think we're already starting to see that, right? There's been a significant brain drain, like in terms of like the financial side of Bitcoin, right? But I think we'll see that more on the development side. So I think any prodigy coder is just going to want to build on Bitcoin because there's going to be such a financial incentive to do so. And where we're at right now, I think people get kind of caught over their skis because we're super eager to scale Bitcoin to the world. But Bitcoin, the Genesis block was January 3rd, 2009. This thing's just over 15 years old. Like, if it was a human, it wouldn't even be able to have a driver's license in my state, right? It's still a very young network, right? And so maybe Lightning is the layer that scales Bitcoin to the world. Maybe it's not, right? If you were looking at the internet 15 years after the creation of the internet, you wouldn't be able to even comprehend all of the applications we're using now, right? I don't think people would have imagined we can have Riverside to record a podcast, right? So I think, who knows what Bitcoin's going to be another 15 years from now. There could be layer twos, layer threes that are fully decentralized and censorship resistant, just like the layer one. But what we don't want to do is like mess up layer one. Scaling is not going to happen there. I think scaling is going to happen in a way that we probably can't even comprehend. I don't even know that it's going to be like, right? I'm not super technical as a developer, but I think it's one of those things where we just have to have patience and kind of let the smart people figure it out. And what's good about Bitcoin is it is really difficult and slow to change. And that's a feature, not a bug, because you don't want to just implement some update and break the whole thing and ruin it for everybody, right? Because I view it as a store of value and being able to preserve your wealth through the future. That's the number one use case, right? If we just have Bitcoin as it is now, we win. Like, this is a win, right? Now, if we can get it to a position where it scales and can be used as a medium of exchange on a day-to-day basis, that's like cherries on top of the sundae, right? That'll be great. But the way Bitcoin is now is also great and can really disrupt financial systems.
Definitely. And then also, I heard someone else was saying that, you know what, and it makes sense. I'm not very technical either, or too techy. But they mentioned, and the bigger the network gets, the more people are in the network, the harder it does become to change too. Because again, you need, I think, the like 51% consensus to get anything changed. But again,
It's even
I'm not
more than
super
that.
technical.
Yeah. So the 51% is for miners like reorganizing the blockchain, right? Because then you can find more blocks on average that sort of catch up to and create the new longest chain. But really, with the nodes, as far as I understand, it's like, hey, if everybody in the world except for you, Xavier, wanted to increase the supply cap of Bitcoin on their node, you could keep running your node with the original rule set. So the real Bitcoin exists, even if it's only on one person, right? So Bitcoin kind of is you run your own rules on your own node, and like you really can't be changed because the incentive there is going to be for everybody to run the most optimal version of Bitcoin. The best analogy I've heard, and actually you reference this in my book, it comes from Checkmate, the analyst at Glassnode. He describes Bitcoin as like the game of chess, right? So if we were playing chess and you are like, hey, I've got this super pawn, it moves like a queen and a knight, it can jump over the board and just beat you instantly. I'm not going to play with you, right? So whatever version of chess you're playing with your super pawn, that's not chess. You can call it, chess cash or chess Satoshi's vision, right? But that's not chess. And you're going to have a hard time convincing everyone in the world to play by your new set of rules.
That makes sense. Do you run your own node?
I guess I'm going to be exposed as a LARP here, but I haven't set that up yet. But with this whole stuff going on with Samurai Wallet and, Phoenix getting taken off the App Store, that's actually on my to-do list for probably sometime in the next month.
For sure. No, I hear you. How how do you research Bitcoin? What are some of the sources you like to use? Where do you like to learn?
Yeah, I'm always checking mempool.space for one, just for like the kind of to look at the mining industry, like what are transaction fees at. I use Glassnode. They're a great primary data resource because they're pulling straight from the chain to be able to look at on-chain data. I read a lot of articles, and I've read I got my own stash of Bitcoin books like you do yourself, I can imagine. So at this point, there's no shortage of resources out there. Twitter being the best one, obviously, right?
Yeah.
If you can curate the people you follow, something I do, like I like to follow all the Bitcoin maxis, but that's gonna kind of create a noisy feed at times. So I turn on notifications for specific accounts that are really putting out like high signal content every day. So I'm usually scrolling through the notifications tab. And yeah, Twitter's gonna be the best resource because you can interact with people in real time too, right? Even really large
Yeah.
accounts, if you reply, like asking a genuine question, they're going to give you a straight up answer. And it's a great resource to use because when I first got on there, I'm like, oh, I don't want to ask a dumb question, be look like an idiot, have people mock me or whatever. That doesn't happen, right? If you're talking to anybody who's really trying to actually educate people, you ask a question, they're going to give you a straight up answer, and you can learn a lot just on Twitter.
I 100% agree. And Twitter Spaces are also amazing. Again, so many people that want to teach, and that's where I even ask some questions on how to get started on certain things, and people usually point you to the right direction. So you're head on the nail with that one. So I've seen some of your posts recently about Home Depot. How did you? How long have you been going to Home Depot, and what's it like over there?
Yeah, it's a kind of a running joke I got with my friend Jason that we work out at Home Depot. It's like, wait, why would you pay for a gym membership when you could save sats and just go carry some sandbags and some mulch and some concrete pillars over at Home Depot and get a little pump going?
Do they? So I haven't been to Home Depot recently, but like it looks like a full-on outdoor gym that you're at. Maybe it's not that, but um, like again, what does it look like when you go there? Do they have just a bunch of stuff set up for you to work out on?
Yeah, they got a little gym out back with some dumbbells and some monkey bars and like a couple barbells and stuff. So it's pretty fun. I enjoy working out, especially outside. So I've been like many people in Bitcoin very much into the health side of things, right? Because if we have all this wealth that we're planning to hold for decades, well, we need to live for decades to actually utilize that. So I really try to take care of my body, and I've been like lifting weights and eating mostly meat for the last couple of years. But in 2024, I've gone really hard on being outside as much as I can. So sunlight maximizing. We could get into this because I used to have there was this trade-off in my mind, right? Do I want to go to the gym or do I want to go outside? So I found a gym that is outside, so I don't have to make that trade-off. I can do both. And people, they say, the sun's bad for you. You spend too much time in the sun, you're going to get burned. And I'll be honest, I spend hours on hours every week in the sun and I don't burn. and I don't use sunscreen. And I'll tell you that here's the 3 tips to not get sunburned. One, you gotta have a clean diet. So cut out seed oils as much as you can. It's gonna take time to really detox them from your body. So I have a really high metabolism. I work out all the time. I'm young. I was always kind of skinny growing up. So I was able to detox seed oils pretty quickly, but that may not be the case for other people. So one is eat clean. Two is get gradual sunlight exposure. So if you live in upstate New York and you're inside 51 days or 51 weeks a year, and then you fly to the Caribbean once a year for a week and you just sit out in UV10 all day, of course you're going to get burned, right? So kind of stay outside throughout the year, get some time at UV3, UV4, UV5 before you're getting up to the really higher levels. So just building it. So when you're wearing sunglasses, this is tricking your brain into thinking that you're inside. And so it's not going to produce as much melanin to protect yourself from the sun. So eat clean, get gradual exposure, and don't wear sunglasses. And you can go outside all the time, get tan and not get burned. I'm not a doctor. I'm also not a financial advisor, but this is what I've been doing and it works.
Wow, that is so interesting. Um, Number one and number two, actually. So eating healthy or having a good diet and then going outside, those are two actually really important things. Just in life, not only
Yeah.
to, I guess, save yourself from a sunburn. The sunglasses, that's interesting. And again, that just like brings back to that's what Bitcoin is. You start to learn about other things. You start to learn about eating healthy and just taking control of your life again, because that's what they've taken away from us.
Yeah, they have. And Bitcoin allows us to, Safety, he touches on this in the Bitcoin standard, the fiat standard, lowering your time preference, right? You're not concerned with how am I going to pay rent? Like, how am I going to do all these things in the short term? And you can really start doing things that will set you up for the long-term success, right? You start lifting weights all the time and eating meat, you're not going to see those results right away. It's going to take time, but Bitcoin gives you that something in the future that is certain, so you can really shift your eyes towards the future a lot more.
Yeah, for sure. And then also, like, I don't, it's maybe the same for you, but like, I'm not as stressed anymore about money because, again, I know that I've found now a better form of money than most people have found or most people are
Right,
on.
right, 100%. And I've seen posts that, and I agree with this sentiment where people are saying, Bitcoin made investing boring for me. There was a popular post going around, like a
Hmm.
Reddit screenshot the other week, and it's so true, right? Because
Yeah.
before you're having to spend all this time, researching markets and stocks and all this stuff to like figure out where to put your capital. Bitcoin, you can just put your wealth in Bitcoin and be completely hands off. You don't even have to think about it more or less and manage that aspect of it, but more or less you can just do that and not have to worry. You don't have to sweat. And, it's kind of on this idea, I see a Bible verse misquoted a lot where people say money is the root of all evil. And that's actually wrong. So the Bible verse is the love of money is the root of all evil. And this may sound kind of ironic considering I've got a Bitcoin poster behind me and I've got a Bitcoin book, but I don't love Bitcoin, right? I don't love money. Money is a tool for moving value either through time or through space. And now that I found Bitcoin, it does that the most effectively. And so I don't have to sit here and worry and love money and really trying to be in this fiat rat race where you're always trying to trade and speculate on markets and kind of be cutthroat, right? I can just put my wealth in Bitcoin, be hands off, and I don't have to love money, and I can actually go and do things that I really do enjoy because money's just a tool for improving your life. It improves trade within the economy and it allows us to store the fruits of our labor across time. Bitcoin does that the best, and so I can really focus on other things in my life that are more fruitful.
Well, that's a great point. And I used to be pretty big on the stock market too, but same ever since kind of finding Bitcoin, it's almost like a waste of time. And it's all you realize that a lot of it is just gambling. And again, there's so much manipulation in the stock market. When you first get into it, maybe you don't believe all that noise that you hear, but then once you get into Bitcoin and probably you're in the stock market a while too, it starts to become obvious. Prices of stocks, they might go up, but again, they go up in fiat. So at the end of the day, a year from now, if it's your stock has gone up 20%, and again, there's are times where the stock goes up 100, 200% like that. That does happen. I've seen it happen many times. But even if it does go up, the value of that USD or that Canadian or whatever currency that you're trading in or investing in goes down. So you
Right.
might make a little bit, but you're also losing a little bit. Um, And then Bitcoin really is the ultimate option for investing, but then also it just as a better form of money. And I feel like that's hard to explain to people
It
in
is.
like simple
Yeah.
terms, like telling them that or just explaining to them that, you know what, the stock market is rigged. And again, you might make money off of it, but that money that you're going to make off of it is fake money too. But
Right.
it's hard to
Right. A
explain
really
that.
good explanation I heard, and I first heard this from John Haar at Swan, so shout out to him, is
Hmm.
that when you're buying stocks, you're making the same implicit bet as when you're buying Bitcoin, which is the dollar's going to continue to get debased. So after 2008, if the Federal Reserve doesn't step in, they don't like, print all this money to save the economy, the stock market's going to crash, right? In 2020, when COVID happened, the stock market crashed. They stepped in and printed a bunch of money, and then it had one of its best years ever, right? If they
Hmm.
don't do that, the stock market goes down. Like it's going down for real. We're going to get like deflation and everything. And so when they're going to print all that money, where's it going to go, right? Bitcoin is the most porous sponge for all of that money. It's the fastest horse. So even if you're buying stocks, right, you're making the same bet that they're going to debase the currency, which is the bet you make when you buy Bitcoin. So why not buy the thing that's going to go up the most in that scenario when they debase the currency?
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Essentially, the reason why, because again, like you just said, the stock market will go down. But when it goes down, they save it by printing again, and then of course that's debasing the currency. So,
Right.
wow.
Same with the real estate market too. All you got to ask these normies is like, hey, why has real estate and stocks, quote unquote, gone up only for the last few decades, right? It's not because they're necessarily becoming any more valuable, right? Like
Right.
a piece of wood that's decaying and that, is shelter, it's not gaining value over time, right? It's just the currency you're measuring it in is losing value.
I say the exact same thing. It's not the value of the house that goes up, but it's the value of your currency losing its purchasing power.
Right.
Um, Rajat Soni compares often. He compares the prices of houses in USD and then to Bitcoin, and then you see that a house 10 years ago cost, let's just say 300,000, whereas that same house today costs 500,000. But if you look at a house in Bitcoin, 10 years ago it cost you 60 Bitcoin, whereas today it costs you 8.9 Bitcoin or 9 Bitcoin. So
Right.
um,
Shifting
I
your
like to make that
mindset to
comparison
to
too.
price things in Bitcoin, that's when you know you've kind of unlocked like stage five orange pill, right? Because you know, fiat struggling as a store of value, obviously bad. It fails as a medium of exchange, but really the under talked about failure of it is as a unit of account, right? You can't measure prices across time and get any kind of uniform data on anything. You can use CPI to adjust for inflation, but that's not real, right? CPI is bogged down with a bunch of crap that's easily mass produced and not as affected by the currency being debased. That we can measure prices against is something we've never seen before in society. At best, you kind of had it with gold, right? I think there's a phrase out there that like an ounce of gold is a fine man's suit or something, right? So gold 2,000 years ago will buy you a nice robes, and now gold today, 1 ounce of gold will buy you a nice suit from uh Men's Warehouse or whatever, right? So we kind of had that with gold, but not really. Gold falls short in a lot of ways. But with Bitcoin, we've got this ruler, this unit of measurement. You wouldn't want, if you were building a house, to have a meter change in definition, right? You wouldn't want a meter today to be a meter and a half tomorrow. That's just going to throw off your whole architecture. Everything is going to have all these inefficiencies. Where that's the exact same thing with fiat when you're building an economy when you're trying to scale a business or do anything where you have to measure prices. Having a poor unit of account is going to really throw things off and cause capital to get misallocated. Where Bitcoin, having the area in the coal mine, it's this beacon of truth that is, hey, this isn't the thing getting diluted. So if you're measuring things against it, you can really see like what the value of that thing is when you're measuring it in terms of Bitcoin.
Definitely. And again, there is no second best. And gold, it was used, but it failed, and that's why they did move into a fiat currency, and then they did move into like a credit type of currency.
Right.
That's because gold was they were able to manipulate it. Yeah, gold might be worth more than a dollar, but of course it would be because it takes a lot more work to get gold than it does to make a dollar.
Right.
Um, but gold has been, it's a metal that can be manipulated, just to even like there's stories of it, like 400 AD or something, but Roman emperors used to debase the gold so that way they can afford to pay their armies to go
Right.
fight for them. So gold is just kind of based off of a lot of manipulation, and it's unfortunately created or minted off the backs of maybe slaves, right?
Right.
Whereas Bitcoin, it's kind of minted on the backs of pioneers.
Oh,
But it's a currency that can't be manipulated to send people to war, can send people to go wreak havoc on the world. Whereas gold, dollars can be manipulated whenever they need to increase that supply and then not tell you maybe that they've increased the supply or something and then send you on your way. But at the end of the
yeah,
day, the
that
value
was
is
well
going down.
said. Yeah. The physical nature of gold makes it really susceptible to manipulation. I hear a common critique or fun that people have about Bitcoin is they're going to do the same thing they did with gold, which is centralized custodians are going to issue more paper claims and fractionally reserve the Bitcoin like they did with gold. But that can't work because Bitcoin is digital. FTX did this, and as soon as there was any kind of sniff of a rumor that this had happened, everybody's demanding withdrawal and custody of their Bitcoin immediately. And the fractional reserve Ponzi was exposed within like 2 days of the rumor, right? Where with gold, they can fractionally reserve it. And because it's physical and everyone has to actually go to the bank and try to take custody that way, you're not going to get these busts of the fractional reserve systems for decades on end. And even then, it's like if you have $1 billion worth of gold, you have to custody it with someone. You need armed guards there 24/7. You're going to put it in a
Yeah.
vault. You can't keep that in your head in 12 words, right? Like you can have $1 billion worth of Bitcoin and literally keep it in your head. So you're not going to have this problem where people can't custody it at large scale, which means you won't have the problem of rehypothecation over a long period of time, suppressing the price of Bitcoin the way it did with gold. So just the mere fact that it's digital makes it like a gajillion times better than gold, right? This is Michael Saylor's kind of core idea in the same way that Spotify dematerialized CDs or Amazon dematerialized a library or a retail store, right? So anything digital is going to be orders of magnitude better than the physical version.
And exactly, and it's public. Everybody can verify it and make sure that it's good. And I love that. Just again, the fact that it'll reduce the wars that are out there because again, you'll think twice about paying an army to go to war for you.
Right.
And then the only way that people maybe fight is if they believe in what they're fighting for now instead of manipulating a currency to go and start wars.
Yeah.
Um,
And you could see that where that would play out today in 2024. I don't
oh yeah.
know how much you get into this in your show, but there's not a lot of support among the populace for sending money to Ukraine and Israel, but they can do it because they have a money printer, right? Where if we were on a Bitcoin standard, they would have to really drum up more propaganda and actually get people riled up to want to pay taxes to go to that war. But they're not able to do that, but they can still fund the war because they have a money printer. But on a Bitcoin standard, you don't have that. You won't see it at all.
Definitely. And how do they even get out of it? Because of course the currency keeps getting debased. It keeps losing its value. And now they owe almost $34 trillion.
Yeah.
And you can't even count to a trillion in a lifetime. Like it would take you again, I'm sure you've seen it, it would take you like 8,000 years or something.
Yeah.
How the heck did they get out of this? And then like the only way I see is to maybe print more to kind
Yeah.
of to make some money back. But again, it's such a bad spot that the world is in right now because of this. Like it
Yeah.
feels like something's gonna collapse soon.
Yeah. If I was, dictator of the United States, here's what I would do. I think you have to focus on the interests of your citizens. Now, granted, I don't think that the current people running our country necessarily do that. But what
Right.
one thing you could do is you could hard default on debt to other countries, right? That's gonna really piss the people off. But they already did that to Russia, right? They froze their US Treasury bonds. They're not paying that back. So hard default on some of that debt. But a lot of the debt and future liabilities is payments to ourselves, right? It's Social Security, it's Medicare. You've got the largest generation population wise, the baby boomers nearing retirement, and they are all dependent on payments from the government, right? So what they can do is through the ETF or kind of this new plumbing that's built, get some Bitcoin exposure in their portfolios before they debase the currency because they're gonna have to debase the currency. It's about how many Americans are holding the thing or at least have exposure to the thing that's gonna go up when they do that. So they can hard default on some of the debt, but they're gonna have to mostly print money because they can't run like a balanced budget and be austerious in that regard because they owe way too much money. There's to say that they can cut spending at this point is a LARP because they have to pay it's like 100 trillion, 200 trillion in future liabilities for just Social Security and Medicare. So cutting spending is not an option, and increasing productivity to increase like tax revenue is also not really an option because that's going to create like market induced deflation. If we get more productive, prices will actually go down, and they can't have that because it's going to make it harder to pay back the debt. So printing money is ultimately the only path forward.
That's crazy. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the next 10, 20 years. Um, any predictions on where the debt is going to be in 10 years?
Whatever. So I think there was a Fed report saying it's going to be like 50 trillion. So we can assume it's going to be higher than that. I don't think they
Yeah,
would like overestimate where it's going to be. So that's definitely the low end of the forecast would be 50 trillion.
that's so crazy. Um, Regulation and legal status vary widely across different countries regarding Bitcoin. How do you think regulatory developments might impact the future of Bitcoin's adoption?
I I make this point in my book, and this is why I love America. It's decentralized. There's 50 states. It's the OG decentralized entity. So I think we could potentially see, hostile legislation from the top down from the federal government, but we have the 10th Amendment. So states don't have to enforce federal law. You saw this play out with marijuana, right? There were plenty of states where it's illegal federally, but the states are like, screw you, we're going to do what we want. I think we're going to see the same thing play out with Bitcoin. You've got states like Florida, Tennessee, Texas, I think Arizona, Wyoming, like they're very much pro Bitcoin and they're going to stay that way because they want to attract that capital. We've already seen this play out with El Salvador, where they make Bitcoin legal tender and a bunch of entrepreneurs and tourists go there and their economy blooms. I think you'll see that same thing play out within the United States, which has got me super bullish. I would never short America. I think there's a reason we've been the most prosperous country over the last 250 years, even though we're the youngest. And it's because of the fact that we are decentralized in the same way that Bitcoin is. So if one state like New York wants to pass this bit license law and make things really difficult for Bitcoin businesses, then other states are just going to be like, hey, come here. And all the Bitcoin companies and all the Bitcoiners will, in those states will flourish. So I'm really, when I think about legislation, I kind of think about it in that regard. And I'm also a little blinded by, I guess, my patriotism. You can see the cover of my book is like the American flag and the Constitution and everything. I'm just hyper bullish on the United States, not because I think the federal government's doing anything right, but I think the way the structure is set up with 50 sovereign states is super bullish. And we saw this kind of play out in COVID times, right? Where different states were radically pro freedom compared to others, and you saw people move to those pro freedom states. So I think that the ultimate checks and balances in the United States really comes from the 50 states and not necessarily in the three branches of government.
That's really interesting. How do you see that in the future? Like having all the states kind of doing different things. Do you see maybe you guys get halted from advancing because certain states don't agree with something? But no, that's great what you said. I agree that people will move to those states that embrace what they're looking for.
Right. I think ultimately there's a level of like monkey see, monkey do with this. So Texas has really embraced Bitcoin miners with their energy grids, and there's like quantifiable benefits from them doing that. You could see where it's improved. So other states are going to see the success. They might not be the first one to do it, but they'll see Texas do it, and they're like, "Hey, that's good policy. We should integrate Bitcoin miners as a demand response program with our energy grids." And so it's kind of the same way with Bitcoin as a financial asset, right? Other states seeing Texas and Florida and Tennessee open up to Bitcoiners and embrace it, and seeing industry flourish and people not be as damaged by inflation. Other states are going to see that success and likely implement similar policy in their states.
Um, some proponents or some people advocate Bitcoin is a hedge against inflation, and economic uncertainty. How do you view Bitcoin's role, in an investment portfolio, particularly in times of economic turmoil like COVID or in times of war? How do you see Bitcoin kind of move?
Yeah, it's in the short term, anything could happen because we are pricing all of these assets in dollars. So the market for US dollars is massive, way bigger than the market cap for Bitcoin. So anything could happen in the short term, but over any decently long time horizon, Bitcoin is the risk off asset. It's the only thing that you can actually own and can't be taken from you and can't be debased. So in times of turmoil or uncertainty, Bitcoin is the thing you want to hold. Granted, in the short term, its price in dollars may go down, but over the long term, because we know they have to print money, we know Bitcoin is a much better thing to hold than US dollars. And in terms of it being a hedge against inflation, I've really started to default to what Parker Lewis says, which is it's not a hedge against inflation, it's a permanent solution to inflation.
Nice. Um, that reminds me of a meme that I saw and I like a lot, and it's a a picture or a screenshot of Leonardo DiCaprio and his friend from The Wolf of Wall Street, and it goes, "Brad, sell me this Bitcoin. Like sell me this pen, but sell me this Bitcoin." And he goes, "Name me one thing that you own that the government can't take from you." And think about it. What do you actually own that they can't take from you other than Bitcoin? Because they could take your house, they could take your money, they could take your family. Technically, they can put charges on you or them and throw them in jail, or again, just take them away from you. So they can really take anything away from you, but they can't take your Bitcoin.
That's spot on. It's the only thing other than
Yeah,
your core values and who you are as a
your
person.
soul,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guess.
They can't take your soul. They can't take your Bitcoin.
The connection
Totally
was being a bit
reasonable to
choppy
want
after, so I
privacy
think
in
it's
your
probably
financial
maybe the
transactions. That's
computer.
not indicative of criminal activity in any sense of the word. If the way Bitcoin works, and you know this, and then people that have studied Bitcoin know this, is whoever you're sending it to, they can look on chain and see the UTXO that you used as an input.
Yeah.
So if you are ordering something online, you're putting in your home address to get something shipped to you and you pay in Bitcoin, they can see the UTXO you sent. So if you got 100 Bitcoin UTXO, they're going to see that on chain and they're going to know where you live. You might not want that. That's a pretty bad combination there. So mixing coins to create privacy is not a bad thing. It's just protecting yourself from potential $5 rent attacks and just maintaining financial privacy. It doesn't mean you're committing crimes. It's like, hey, you wouldn't go to the grocery store and have the cashier break $100,000 check, right? It's the same thing with Bitcoin. So I mean, granted, like, don't taunt the government like they did. I mean, I'm all for that. Believe me, I get it. Like, I thought their tweet about, hey, Russians come use the the thing was funny too, but you got to be a little wiser than that. Bitcoin, it is coming for these systems of power. You don't want to be made an example of. You don't want to be a martyr like Ross Ulbricht and now like these samurai guys. So, like, do what you can. You got to protect yourself, right? Obviously, don't compromise on your values and stand on 10 toes. Stand on business, but don't make yourself like a target unnecessarily, right? Don't tweet at the IRS mocking them and saying you're not going to pay your taxes because they will use these things against you in the court of law. So really, I don't know. That's definitely some advice I should probably follow more myself. But we all gotta kind of look out for ourselves when it comes to this, right? Yeah, at some point, you and I are probably both gonna vanish from the internet. If we're right about Bitcoin, you won't be seeing me on podcast or writing any more books about it. I'm sure you're probably the same way. Multi-sig, hold your own keys. That's gonna be the most secure way. Now, there's a stat out there like more Bitcoin is lost from user error than from theft. So keep that in mind, right? Don't get over your skis. Like, definitely don't go from holding your Bitcoin on Coinbase to holding a complex 5 of 9 multi-sig. Like, there's steps in between you got to get familiar with. But you definitely at least got to have single sig, air gapped hardware wallet for sure. Never put your keys into anything that's connected to the internet. Absolutely not, unless you want your Bitcoin to get stolen. So And kind of to really wrap up that point is Bitcoin is more secure when you hold it. First, when a custodian holds it, we've seen plenty of custodians implode, lose the coins, or rehypothecate them, whatever. So hold your own keys, but definitely kind of know what you're doing. But it's really not that hard though. Like single sig, 12 words or 24 words, you can do that pretty easily. Just keep them secure. Bitcoin, if it doesn't work as a store of value, then none of us are going to be here working on it and building on it. So, and the good thing is like price is going to continue to go up, but that's really why I'm here. I want to preserve the purchasing power for myself as an individual to improve my life. And yeah, I think there's a lot of tangential benefits to number go up. I think it will improve society, but ultimately purchasing power go up is the core of Bitcoin, right? It's not nobody's going to be in this altruistically, or at least it won't scale to be the network we want it to be altruistically, right? Like miners, if you think about it from that perspective, they're out there to make a profit, right? They want to make money. They're not just securing the network and using all this energy because they want to and they care about, censorship resistant money. Like that's part of it. But if they weren't making money, they wouldn't be mining. And it's the same with Bitcoin. Like if price doesn't go up like it has over the past 15 years, then we're gonna have a lot less Bitcoin adoption. But that sounds like like kind of farce or whatever. But price is gonna go up because the dollar's gonna get debased. So it's a little bit of a moot point. But I do think number go up is kind of people say, oh, that's like a fiat thing to like care about the price,
Right.
but I don't think it is at all. And we can use those rallying cries during the bear market, like HODL, 1 Bitcoin is 1 Bitcoin, price doesn't matter, which is true if you have that long-term time horizon. But the only reason that's true is because you intuitively understand that number will go up, right? You wouldn't just want to keep holding if Bitcoin is at 16,000 for the next 15 years. Like you would look back and be like, dang, that kind of sucks. But we know that Bitcoin will eventually go up in terms of fiat.
Yeah, for sure. I always think like when I buy it, I'm like, who cares if it's at 70,000? Who cares if it's at 60,000 or 50,000 or 40,000? Because years from now it'll be at 100,000, two hundred
Right.
thousand. And okay, so I have a couple questions for you. One, we were talking about it a bit earlier, but how much Bitcoin do you think is lost?
Rough estimates from people that are smarter than I am is about 1/3 of all the coins, and that the number will slowly trickle up over time, right? Because lost
Wow.
coins can never be found. But I think we won't see as many lost coins now that we've got all these great resources for holding your own keys. One, and then two, you're going to see people kind of lean on custodial solutions more as we go forward, I would imagine. But when you've got resources like Thea and you got cold cards and you've got Wasabi wallet, Sparrow wallet, like it's all this stuff is getting easier to use and there's more education. So I think you'll see coins get lost less. But yeah, we're probably at about 1/3, I would imagine.
So like 7 million Bitcoin you think we've lost already?
Yeah, I would say that's probably a reasonable estimate.
Wow.
There's a lot of coins that haven't moved in a long time, and are people really like, hey, I bought Bitcoin in 2010 or 2011, and here it is, thousands of percent later. I'm just gonna keep holding and not move any of them, or it's like, hey, these coins are just lost.
But like say somebody bought back in 2010 and they have a lot of Bitcoin. If they sold just like one or two whenever they needed, I guess,
Yeah.
funds, does that like would that reflect really on that report?
Yeah. I mean, you could see it on chain when those coins move, but yeah, I guess they wouldn't necessarily need to sell a whole lot of their stash to
Yeah.
fund their lifestyle. And I mean, it depends how lavishly they want to live, I suppose. But yeah, I think that we'll get more insight into this as time goes on and number continues to go up and we have more on-chain data.
Do you think like how many people do you think have like thousands of Bitcoin that are just anonymous?
I've thought about this, right? Like, how many people are in Bitcoin that aren't on Bitcoin Twitter and aren't vocal about it?
Hmm.
I think there's probably more that are not like vocal in any capacity because it's more aligned with the Bitcoin ethos
Yeah.
of privacy and self-sovereignty. In terms of people with thousands of Bitcoin, I mean, it's going to be a very, very, very tiny percentage of the global population because even if you bought it back then, did you have the balls to hold through all these bear markets and then the discipline to hold through the bull markets and not really get like ball out, so to speak. So it's Definitely very, very few people. I think a lot of like few people even have one Bitcoin. Mathematically, it's
Right.
going to be less than, let's see, there's 8 billion people in the world. So 1% of 8 billion would be 80 million, and there's 21 million Bitcoin. So that's another 0.5% of that. So at the best, if no coins are lost and all 21 million are distributed evenly, still less than 1% of the population could be a whole coiner. So assuming a third of the coins are lost, and then you've got all these whales with thousands of Bitcoin, like I would say it's reasonable to assume that there is maybe a million whole coiners in the world. Like that to me is probably the best estimate.
A million whole coiners right now or in the future?
Right now, I think that number will probably go down because most of the world is priced out of a whole coin at this point, especially if you're not on like a Western income, you're not getting to a whole coin, no shot. And even if you are, like, how many people have 60,000 liquid that they're willing to just nut into Bitcoin right now?
Right.
Probably not a lot of people. And if price is going to continue to go up, that's just going to price more and more of the population out of being a whole coin.
It's kind of sad. Like, I mean, it's not sad because now you can go at it from experience, but it's a bit sad looking back and thinking I could have sold this and that and this and that when Bitcoin was at 16,000 last year. And then
Yeah.
here we are, the price has gone up like by 3 or 4 now. Um, and
Yeah, I think the 2022 bear market was the last shot that most people had at reaching whole coiner status because at 20,000 that's reasonable, especially
yeah,
if you were dollar cost averaging throughout all of 2022 and you were prudent with your finances. I think a lot of people, even just like middle class income, could have got to whole coiner status, but now I think we've sort of crossed that Rubicon, and people are going to be gunning for half a Bitcoin, and then another cycle they're going to be gunning for a quarter of a Bitcoin or zero point 0.1 Bitcoin, and that sort of like, hey, I made it number is just going to continue to get lower.
yeah. Especially as like yeah, of course, like as soon as the reward gets down to like 0.01 Bitcoin too, like that's when you
Right.
see all this energy in the world working towards getting 0.01 Bitcoin. That means the
Right.
price of that should be up there.
Well, it's gonna be yeah, it's gonna be interesting like with this global competition for energy. I think the Bitcoin mining industry is really fascinating. I mean, it incentivizes mass production of energy, which historically has had a positive correlation with life expectancy. So I'm looking forward to the whole Bitcoin mining aspect of hyper Bitcoinization, which is kind of entirely separate from Bitcoin, the asset and the financial side of it.
Okay, can you like elaborate on that?
Yeah, so with Bitcoin mining, I got a chapter about this in my book, and I'm not the first one to discuss this idea by any means, but
Hmm.
there's a problem with energy production. I guess I should say a challenge is demand is volatile. You don't know how much energy you need to produce. So if you're trying to provide enough power for a town, right, you want to be able to produce enough power so for peak demand, which is going to be late summer evenings in August, July, around 5 to 7 o'clock in the afternoon. Everybody gets home from work, they're cooking, they're doing laundry, and they're running their AC. So you need energy for that, but you don't want to overproduce all the time throughout the year because it's a literal waste of energy. And as the energy company, you're obviously going to be losing money, right? So you're disincentivized for that. So you want to be able to meet those points of peak demand, but not really be overproducing all year round. So Bitcoin miners, because they can consume large quantities of energy 24/7, and they can unplug their machines at any time, they can fill that gap and be what's called demand response. So when demand is low, they're consuming all that power. When demand gets high, they unplug, and that energy's there for everyone else to use. Because without that, you could underproduce energy, have blackouts and brownouts, and not have energy when people need it the most. If there's a blizzard or a heat wave, right? Everybody's going to want energy at that point, and if you can't supply it, that means people are going to die. Like people are going to, they're going to freeze, and they're going to, it's going to be a really bad time. So Bitcoin miners, they allow energy companies to just scale and produce, and it's okay to overproduce because the Bitcoin miners will buy it all, right? The best analogy I've heard is like if you run a cookie store and I come in the morning, I'm like, hey, make as many cookies as you can. I'll buy it all at the end of the night. But when regular customers come in, I'll back off and they can buy it so you don't piss off your regular customers. So you as the cookie store owner can just make a bunch of cookies and you're confident because you know you have that buyer of last resort. And that's how Bitcoin miners operate with energy grids.
I'll have to do my research on the energy consumption and the whole energy aspect of the mining. And then that's the thing. Again, with Bitcoin, it's just so much education that you can get, and it on so many different parts of life. Um, and even earlier, I remember what I was going to say, but Bitcoin helps you save. Bitcoin helps those bad spending habits that you have because you're thinking this money might be better in Bitcoin than me going to the bar and spending 50
Right.
to 100 bucks at the bar every week. It's, you know what, if I have money for the bar, I have money for Bitcoin in my future, right? Um, what do you think about MicroStrategy owning over 1% of the entire Bitcoin float?
Good for them. I wish I owned 1% of the Bitcoin supply. And this is why proof of work is superior to proof of stake, because if they were proof of stake consensus on Bitcoin, then MicroStrategy would be in a pretty good position. They'd be able to control the network and influence transactions, but they can't because it's proof of work. So them owning more Bitcoin does not give them any more control over the supply. So hats off to Saylor for being the man, right? He did that, and nobody else is going to be able to get 1% of the supply under their control, right? Like BlackRock in the ETF, but it's for their clients, so it's not really the same thing there. So good. I mean, kudos to Michael Saylor, and I'm going to continue watching him buy Bitcoin and cheer him on. I think he's been one of the most well articulate Bitcoin speakers, and especially given his public profile, being the CEO of a Fortune 500 company and really putting his money where his mouth is too. It's not just him going on and saying these things. He runs a publicly traded business. You can see the financials, and he's performing a speculative attack on fiat currency on overpriced equities. So I'm glad we get to watch it play out in real time.
Yeah, me too. I think he's great for the space. He likes. I think he has Bitcoin University and he has different resources to kind of help people
Hmm.
see Bitcoin. I love the one video of his that like I guess he's in podcasts and people ask him questions and he goes before speaking.
Yeah.
I like that, and I also like that video that was taken recently of him walking out on stage and everybody's cheering for him.
Yeah.
That was pretty epic.
Sailor memes are awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure, for sure. Even that one song, people that save in fiat currency, we call them poor. Somebody made like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
video that was funny. Um, and you know what? I thought about this too. Like, okay, what if he sold all that Bitcoin, right? Like, what if they just got rid of it and went to fiat? I was thinking, okay, who cares? He's selling it to somebody. Somebody else is
Yeah.
going to buy that, and then Bitcoin's going to move without him. But I don't think that'll ever happen.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But if it did, we'll buy it all. Price will go down in the short term, but it'll get bought up, and the people who hold the Bitcoin there will have more conviction than he did, and price will begin to go back up. So the floor is there somewhere, right? Because you've got holders of last resort, which you don't necessarily have with any other asset. Definitely not any other crypto.
Yeah, for sure. Um, okay, we covered a lot. What is a message that you might have for people who are watching that are just looking to get into Bitcoin or who haven't heard about Bitcoin yet? What would you maybe want to say to them to give them the orange pill or help them on their path?
It's Bitcoin or have fun staying poor, right? If you hold wealth in fiat currencies, you're going to be poor. You're going to lose the purchasing power. The work you put in today, you're not going to get your value out of it in the future, right? So saving something that can't be debased, saving something that's going to increase in purchasing power over time, and nobody can do the work for you, right? You got to go read books, go listen to podcasts, come to your own conclusion, right? Maybe we're crazy, maybe we sound stupid or whatever, and maybe we are, but I would recommend doing your own research and figuring that out for yourself.
Awesome, man. Thanks for coming on and well said. Again, thanks for joining us today, Mitchell. You just came out with a book. You know what? Actually, just before ending, can you? So you have the new show that you have. You have the book that you released. What else are you working on in the Bitcoin space, or what do you want to work on?
Yeah, so right now, the rest of the year is definitely going to be like hammer my book and promoting that and then building this new show. So if you want to keep up with
Nice.
what I'm doing, you follow me on Twitter. It's my biggest platform. That's where I'm most active. It's at Mitchell Hoddle, so Mitchell Hoddle, and you'll see everything I'm doing there. And if you got any questions, definitely shoot me a DM.
Sounds good. Are you on any other social media?
No, pretty much it's just Twitter. I think it's by far the best. I mean, we get into Nostr another time, but yeah, just Twitter for now.
I agree. And like you said earlier, like you can reply to big accounts on Twitter and if you're replying something with thought behind it and uh, I guess if you're genuine in your comment, like you'll get an answer back.
Yeah,
And no, that
it's definitely the public square for sure.
definitely. Okay. Well, again, thanks for joining us and everyone go make sure to follow Mitchell Hoddle on Twitter. Awesome.
Thanks for having me on, man. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, anytime. Take care.